My name is Jed, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm glad to have you all in chat. We have been having some wonderful discussions about questions and insights and being curious and being puzzled and how frustrating that can be, how annoying that can be, how strong tangents can be, how challenging it can be to follow questions and answers, how challenging it can be to simply hold that uncomfortable state of not knowing, but how worth it might end up being if our wonder and our questions lead somewhere, lead to the core of a question, or lead to all of a sudden insight. But as we've been talking about today in chat, often these insights are accompanied very quickly by a new, bigger, fatter, even more puzzling question. And what happens if we keep that pattern going and we keep playing the game, valuing the question, sharing with our friends, practicing the dialectic, practicing following the questions as best we can, seeing where the logos takes us, while these fatter questions with the fatter level of uncomfortableness may end up leading to fatter insights. But you know what happens then? Even more puzzles and questions. Oh my word. As we said in the chat, it's questions and insights all the way down. What kind of a strange world we're in that a few weirdo philosophers can entertain themselves for an hour and a half going on this kind of a journey. What a waste of time, some people may say. We might say, what a curious reality we find ourselves in, that this can happen if we get lucky enough to find others who are curious about playing this sort of game as well. Thankfully, we have a small community that's growing of people who do find this interesting, even though you can't patent this game and sell it for $5 with a cheeseburger in Ohio, as somebody says in chat. Even though you can't make a buck out of it, it might be worth doing. I wonder why. And I wonder why reality is such as it is in this kind of a way. So, enough to say, even though I happen to be the one asking the questions, I seem to have come out on the other side even more puzzled and curious and confused and uncomfortable than anybody here. So I wasn't expecting that. So if I seem weird today, it's just because I'm full of puzzlement and wonder and curiosity. Speaking of which, we are curious about something that Meno has asked, whether or not virtue can be taught. And we have a whole bunch of other questions to add to our puzzlement. How is Socrates answering? Why is he answering in this way? What has he said? How is he able to judge Meno the way that he did? Recognizing his teacher, recognizing his relationship, recognizing the culture he's from, even recognizing similar other cultures. And what is he talking about when Socrates says, I have never met somebody who... What did he say? Let's get the exact quote from the text. I have never met anybody who knows what virtue is and whether or not it can be taught. Upset our friend Meno a little bit. In chat, I was laughing when I hit the unknowing part of the dialectic we were in earlier. Interesting. It's a good way of relating to it. So, Meno not happy because Socrates has met Meno's teacher. And that means by implication that his teacher doesn't know what virtue is or whether it can be taught. This might be quite upsetting, especially if you love the guy. It can be really difficult for people to see their loved ones as not knowing the things they claim to know, especially if they're parents or family members. The ones we love the most due to conditions of being a human being and a baby reliant upon it, especially in our culture where you're kind of stuck with them in the box that you were born into, in the house, that is. We have a strange society where you're kind of stuck there. You can't wander down the street and live in another house for a while if ma or pa is being however to you. So it's part of our survival to believe that whoever we were born into a family with is right and caring and loving and maybe even knowing. So it can be a challenge. Anyone who is going along with our reading of the Philosophical Midwifery series on the YouTube channel and has gone through philosophical midwifery themselves recognize that difficulty, which actually might be quite similar to the difficulty we were going through in our dialectic today. Now, we weren't undoing a false belief tied to a teacher who we believed to be true and knowing and wise. We were simply following the logos towards truth itself. Either way, even though it's different, there was still that difficulty, and it required courage and focus and recognizing tangents, recognizing states of mind that can make it difficult, thoughts and feelings that come up that want us to run away, do something else. It requires recognizing that, understanding that, not following the negative distractions and tangents, having courage and integrity and temperance even to follow the logos. So it takes a certain kind of person to go through this game. And if you feel like you are that kind of person, feel free to join on Discord. There should be a link below. So Socrates says he hasn't met anybody who knows what virtue is, and he has challenged Meno to define what it is. And Meno, couldn't do it. He gave that's our question. What did Meno do? Using the dialectic as our guide. Did he give a demonstration of it? Did he outline divisions without first defining what he thought virtue was? That's a question we have. What did he do? Well, he definitely didn't define it, and Socrates is helping him to realize what it would mean to define it. Already, we have gone through a dialectic to do with the definition of virtue. Hey, if virtue has to exist universally, then its existence can't only be in the physical world, because the physical world that we perceive with our senses is in a state of change and flux. So if there's a principle that's universal, it has to be in a different realm that we call being. Necessarily, for it to work as an adjective, be a noun that creates an adjective in this kind of virtuous person, and a virtuous man or a virtuous wife or a virtuous slave. So even with it using Meno's own language, own examples, Socrates is guiding him through simple questions and judging his answers, using his words, using his language, using his examples, guiding him to an insight. Now, the insight at the end of that dialectic, which was, let's bring up our notes to remind us. Here is our blackboard. Come up. is. Here it is. The stages of the first dialectic that we could see from Socrates. I see virtue in the chat as execution of ethics. Interesting. Now, execution, we might say, is a kind of functioning or use or demonstration. Meno's question was, can virtue be taught? And Socrates' response was, let's check it out in the text. Hey, by the way, before we talk about whether or not it can be taught, isn't that a quality? Let's bring it up in the text. By the way, shouldn't we know about the thing itself, definition, before we talk about its quality? If nobody knew what Meno was, can we talk about whether or not he's handsome or rich or noble? It's right here in text. So the good thing about the way that we read, by seeing it within the structure of the dialectic, is we can understand it, we can make it ours. So if we have a similar question, like Meno, or have a friend with a similar question, like Socrates, we can apply the principle. So if virtue is the execution or the use or using the dialectic, what's execution like? Demonstration, function? Maybe, let's see. If virtue is the demonstration of ethics, then we probably have to use this principle and say, well, before we can talk about how it's used, maybe we should talk about what it is. Just like Meno, before we can talk about its qualities or division, maybe we should talk about what it is as a definition. So there's a benefit in the order. So yeah, so we would say, well, what is ethics then? Because that might be just swapping one term for another. It's virtuous to be ethical. And what's ethical? Well, ethical is being virtuous. We want to get to the heart of what it is. And Meno said, well, I can tell you what it is. Very easy. Glad you asked me, Socrates. You're going to learn something today. Everyone will talk about the day that Socrates met Meno, and Meno gave him a good lesson on what it means to be virtuous. Dumb old Socrates. Good thing you asked me. It's easy. Look, virtue is pretty much being competent to manage the affairs of the city. But it's actually different for a woman. A woman, it's you need to take care of the house, cook a good dinner. And by the way, not only do you have to take care of the city for a man, you have to do good to your friends, right? And harm your enemies. Crush them. And hear the lamentations of their women. A quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger. But also be able to get out of ever getting caught yourself. But it's different. Virtue is different from a woman and different from a slave. A woman's virtue is to be obedient to the man. Hot take there from Meno. Maybe less hot at his back in the day, in his time, but well, different virtue for a child, different virtue for a free man and a slave. Very Christian, we would say, for those familiar with the Bible. Not just Christian, Judeo, what's the word? The Abrahamic religions, they have texts which say, oh yes, it's good for a slave to obey your master. Thankfully, we have a different take on that now, which obviously leads to implications. If you push the implications, what does it mean if these people who are selling these books and getting all the money and followers from whatever religion they're in are saying, hey, you know, God's never wrong. That's why you should just believe me. Well, he was wrong about that. That's a tangent, but a worthwhile one at this current point in time where we are at. So, Socrates was fortunate because he asked for one thing, a definition, and he got a swarm. Like a swarm of bees. And he said, by the way, speaking of bees, if I said, what is a bee? And you said, hey, what's a bee? A bee is a big bee and a small bee and a woman bee and a man bee and a beautiful bee. Are you really talking about what a bee is, or are you describing its qualities? But you would think that there is such a thing as a bee, right? You know what I mean when I say bee, even though you might go into describing it. Same too with virtues. That's his lead-in. Funny, charming, not being a dick about it. Fortunately, I mean, maybe like a charming, if you were to say it's dickish, to say, oh, how lucky that I have found that I got a swarm when I asked for one. Having fun, right? Have fun in this game. So, there's a singular idea for a bee, just as there is a singular idea for virtue. And by the way, he gives us a little bit of information. For those of us who this isn't their first Socratic text and have already seen the value of the dialectic, as we were talking about today, he's giving us a bit of extra information. By the way, you will do well, beautifully is the word, to keep your eye fixed upon your singular eidos. Now, eidos is another tricky one. Speaking of people who, in our current time, wield power even though they're off the mark, or teaching something poor and get money and followers for doing so. Well, we're not just throwing people involved in cults or religions under the bus. We can also talk about people in the European academic tradition too, because this word eidos has been tragically mistranslated as form, which gives it a physical connotation or something abstract, an abstract idea, because the word eidos sounds like idea. The term is sometimes used anglicized. You try to squish it into the English language. Now, idea for us is an abstract concept. Eidos isn't this. It means to grasp or behold. Yes, good point in chat. Many treat philosophy as a hobby. Bit of fun for the kids until you wake up and you realize the real world is about whatever, some other thing. You name it, anything else. Anyway, so one of the great betrayals to our intellectual and spiritual heritage and golden age and lineage and birthright is to mistranslate eidos as concept or form or idea. It ain't. It means to behold. And what do you behold? What's the object of knowledge? Being. So Socrates is saying, hey, if there is such a thing as virtue, don't describe how its use in different things in the physical world. Talk about it itself in being, the noun. And by the way, as an aspect of the noun, being, what we sometimes call the second hypothesis, because that's what Parmenides explores in his second hypothesis in the Parmenides. One way of beholding it is to recognize the aspect of it as virtue. Those are the ideas. And that's what you keep your eye on, all of those who already know the significance of the dialectic. Meno won't be getting this, but we can. What is it? Keep your eye fixed upon it when you answer questions and ask them. Specifically, what is the being of virtue? Now, What is the being is another way of saying exists, because being exists. So what is the thing here in Greek? What if being exists? Now we know that what if X exists is literally the title to all dialectics. What if X that I wish to explore exists? Now we also have to do side B, what if X doesn't exist? Earlier today in the chat, our friend Last Philosopher said, had an idea. What if words have no meaning? It was voiced as an opinion, of course, which is how we're trained to do. Make confident assertions. That shows your knowing. How else will you know? Will you listen to this person or that person? Hey, if there's no truth, if there's no meaning in language, then how will you know who's right and wrong, who to follow, who to give money to? So we see a contradiction, even though people claim nowadays, a popular belief is there is no truth, there is no meaning in language. We accept that, but we very quickly contradict ourselves because those people we think is knowing something. So it's a contradiction there. Hey, is that statement true? But didn't you say there's no truth? But you want us to follow you, right? You want to seem knowing. Doesn't that mean that there's something that you know? And of course, we don't believe this because we know that there is a truth to how to fix your arm when it's broken. We go to the doctor and pay a lot of money in some countries to do that. So even though very quickly it diminishes upon simple reflection, it is a popular way of framing our thoughts. So we encourage our friend to phrase it as a question. Now, if we phrase it as a question and play the game, can we phrase it as a question within the dialectic structure? What does that mean? Not only would he phrase it as a question, as I think he did, what if words have no meaning? And then in the fashion and the tradition, in the spirit of a dialectic, pushing the implications, what would follow? Divisions. What would follow in this? What would follow in this? What would follow in this? And the better we get at dialectic, the better we can do that unfolding of our reason. But we encourage our friend, okay, now do the side B. What if there was meaning in words? Now, this can be a challenge. Why? Because it takes you from being certain of your opinion to be open to new insight, seeing in a new way. Why is that a challenge? Well, in a world that often rejects the logos, anti-logos Socrates calls it, this openness to new thinking can be a threat to your appearance. Look at him, he might change his mind. He's not so smart after all. Not only the appearance, the role we have within our culture, our job, or in particular, our family. What role is that? To play the knower. Look at how confident mum or dad is. Look at them go. They know, and they're never curious. They always act as though they know. That's what it means to be knowing. And of course, it's not just within families. This is writ large, or amplified, or demonstrated within politics and culture and stuff. So, it's a trade-off. You sacrifice this false idea of what it means to be wise, which is certain, closed-minded, just fighting for your opinions. You sacrifice that and whatever honor and fame and riches you get from your family or society for something else. What do you trade it in for? Openness, possibility for growth, possibility for new insights, possibilities to change your mind, possibilities for enlightenment, possibilities for spiritual development, personal development, possibility to actually free ourselves from our problems and discover our destiny, what we might call our purpose for being here or the meaning of life. Is it worth the trade? Well, if you're watching this video, you probably have made the decision, well, yeah, of course it is. And of course, that's the insult. Dog. You're a dog. What does that mean? Dogs are lovely. No. Dog means to be blindly loyal to someone, whether or not they are true and good. That's terrible. You don't want to be a Nazi, blindly obedient to Hitler. So why be blindly obedient to a way of being that shuts down the logos for the fame or wealth or honor within the family that it gets you? Now, we know that this might make sense for we philosophers, but there are some people who are that way inclined still. Part of our evolution. Now, hopefully the more we show that there is a logos, it's not a bad thing to follow the logos. It's worth it. Even the confused uncomfortableness at not knowing is worth it. Then hopefully maybe we'll find a new way of binding together, not in shared loyalty to ignorance and the appearance of knowing by being certain or appearing certain, acting certain, anti-logos, debate bros, but to be bound together in a new kind of tradition where we can embrace the logos, openness, mind itself, wonder, curiosity, puzzlement, all those good things that we see. So, I'm looking forward. Oh, in the chat, sorry, let's go back. I know virtue can be seen because I'm certain that virtue is the execution of ethics. So I guess the definition of virtue is a consistent practice of ethical principles. With this puzzle, I started with a demonstration execution and broke the order. Nicely seen. Yes, and our friend is seeing, so our friend in the chat before this podcast had a question about how to name, because he's been practicing his dialectic, so that's what we do in this game. We practice dialectics as much as we can, as we're doing in our reading. So he was wondering, what could be the title of my dialectic? He's got that question. A kind of openness makes you feel vulnerable. Whoa, yes. That's something we've got to deal with. And the more we understand the logos and the cause of the logos, so we're talking about the title. It's not the definition. Definition and demonstration, division, and synthesis analysis are the four categories of the dialectic, but the conditions for the dialectic or the cause of the dialectic, we could say, is the title itself. So there's a kind of hidden fifth category standing above. Equally so, we are investigating the logos, but there might be a special, secret, hidden question. What is the cause of the logos? By the way, our investigation into the cause of the logos and the logos itself, as well as our definition of the logos, our demonstration of the logos in our dialectics with our friend, divided up into our exploration of our questions, our problems, our dreams, our reading, might lead us to the synthesis or conclusion that we are not vulnerable, that the logos comes from a source and functions to benefit us in the greatest possible way. It is constantly communicating for us and for our highest benefit. If it's demonstrating itself or functioning in that way, we must therefore be able to define it as being supremely wise, knowing, caring. These are the qualities it has. Therefore, we might be more and more okay with being open the more that we investigate dialectics on the logos itself. Now, of course, these can be also seen within the hypotheses of Parmenides. The functioning could be the third. The definition could be the second. Anyway, things to wonder about. Yes, people don't want to look ignorant. Appearances. I love people like I love dogs. Right. But Dogs are amazing, of course. Imagine if they had the ability to judge whether or not the owner that they are following is worth following. That might be the next stage of their evolution. I don't know. We'd have to find a different insult metaphor to call people who are blindly obedient to traditions. Maybe conservative one day will be the insult for that. Conserving the ways of the past. Make my country like it was in the past. Anyway, so can we teach virtue to a dog? So we've got a new question we're carrying. We have Meno's question. Can virtue be taught? Socrates is saying, hang on, son, don't you want to know what virtue is first? Oh yeah, I know what virtue is. Let me tell you, it's a swarm of bees. Is this virtue of a woman is obeying your husband? The virtue of a man is punishing enemies and getting away with it, and so on. But hang on, maybe you don't know what virtue is. Let's nail it down first. So, what is virtue we're carrying? Can it be taught? Secondary. Also, we've got a new question we're carrying. Can we teach virtue to a dog? That's the most important one. Maybe let's carry that one with us too. And we can ask Bunny the Talking Dog. Follow Bunny the Talking Dog on Instagram. She wonders about dreams. Anyway, what is the being of virtue, the title of a dialectic? All right, so Socrates is saying, hey, start with the definition. By the way, I'm giving you a clue. I am doing the dialectic. What's the clue? The title. What does virtue exist? We would catch that if we were familiar with the dialectic. Why? Because we know the word exists doesn't mean exists in the physical world. That's usually what is given to side B. Hey, if does beauty exist? Then define it. Well, it must be eternal. It must be immortal. Why? Because these are the qualities of being. So we know exists correlates to the realm of being. And side B, if beauty doesn't exist, we're not saying it's impossible. We know we have a word or an idea of some kind, but it's only in the physical world. That would be side B. It doesn't exist. It's just something in the physical world. An opinion, a lie, maybe, a manipulation. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What do the scientists say? An evolutionary byproduct to allow mating to occur. These would be category 3 if it doesn't exist. It's not diminishing it. It's not as Parmenides would say, it's not unbeing. It's just not in the realm of being, only in the physical realm. So, if we are familiar with that, we can recognize what is the being of virtue is another way of saying, what if it exists? And of course, if we know, familiar with the dialectic, we recognize this as the title too. Do you understand what I say? Says Socrates. So he's saying, hey, look, to those who are reading, look for the dialectic. That's what I'm going to be doing. Okay? And so he did it. He demonstrated the dialectic. How? Well, he said, this is what it is. It's an idea. This is how you use it or you function with it. Demonstration. You keep your eye on it when you do a dialectic. When you ask, what is the being of virtue? When you ask and answer questions. Division, does he divide it up? So this is where we get our arguments. So one of the questions in the chat today was, what if you are reasoning and you come across something that doesn't fit, or a contradiction or a paradox. That's in the division stage. You divide it up. It's kind of where the arguments come in. So the argument was, hey, by the way, these are some other ideas. ADOS, health, size, strength. It's the same for a man and a woman, right? You have big women and little women, as you have big men and little men in strength, same thing. Sure. Therefore, the ADOS of health is the same everywhere. Conclusion or synthesis. And asking a question, are you on board? Every step of the way he's on board. There's no monologuing or speech making or shouting over. Hey, at the time of the recording, there is the Democratic National Convention in the drama that is American politics. And recently on the Colbert Report, the Late Show, Stephen Colbert interviewed Nancy Pelosi, one of the big power brokers of the Democratic Party. And there were protesters saying, hey, you guys are all into joy and fun and saying everything is rosy and peachy, but you guys are funding a genocide right now. This is freaking terrible. Don't do genocide. How dare you do genocide and ignore it? And while ignoring our questions and pretending you are the party of justice. And what did she do? She did a little monologue. Didn't engage in a dialectic, didn't ask the person questions. Stephen Colbert started to, like, hey, this is a real question. Let's hear his question. Wow, a sudden change in the way media reports and thinks. Let's actually, instead of just attacking people for asking questions, because that might challenge the power of the people in charge or the status quo that those people are exploiting, let's actually do a dialectic maybe. Didn't get very far because Nancy Pelosi just pretended she didn't hear, so big fat liar, and then just gave a speech. Well, right to defend yourself, and two-party solution, and shut up. So we're not doing that here. We're not doing talking points, shouting at someone because we're liars, committing genocide, right? So, okay, not all of us are committing genocide, but we can look at the people who are and say, oh, hell, they are not doing this. They're doing the opposite of this. So it would be side B. What if the dialectic didn't exist? Well, people who will do genocide can never be held to account, never have to answer a question. Oh well. Sucks to be people who are being genocided and their loved ones and any human being with empathy on this planet. So what's he doing instead? He is saying, hey, do you agree with me? Are we together here? Are we together here? And he follows all the way along to the synthesis step, the first half of the last one. Let's remind us, what are the categories of dialectic? Here we go. Definition, thing itself. Demonstration, how it functions. Divide up, health, size, strength. Same for both men and women. The last thing has two parts. Synthesis, you bring your arguments together. Can you come to a conclusion? Or is there one of these that stands out among all, more encompassing of the rest? Causal, maybe. Well, there was a conclusion that applied to all of them. All of them are the same for men and women. As an ADOS, their definition. Therefore, all ideas don't differ whether demonstrated on men or women. That's the conclusion. Meno said, yep, I'm with you. Nancy Pelosi pulled out what remains of her hair and ran crying and screaming into the green room because doesn't like this. And therefore, there's one more step to the conclusion, to the last stage. And by the way, you can use just 2 letters to remember and understand the 4 categories. Self and other. Self itself. What's the self? This thing you're defining, the self, the subject. Self or subject. How would you talk about it only itself? Definition. How would you talk about it relating to another? Self to other. Those others, how do they divide up to other others? Others to others. And from these others and others, how does that relate back to the start? Simple, isn't it simple? Just 2. The basis for all rational thought, not just ration, but intelligible, meaning not just reason, not just logic, has an existence in being, which means it is eidos, knowable. So all reason and knowability can be understood just with 2 things. Isn't that amazing? Now, in dialectic fashion, what's the implication of that? To learn any one, all you need is 2. To learn any one subject, all you need is 2 ideas, self and other. And you'll have 4 arrangements of them. Where's my pen? Not this pen. Not this pen. This pen. Wow. Where's my...
That's one for the blooper reel.
I had the wrong pen.
That's one for the blooper reel.
That's one for the blooper reel. Okay. There are 4 possible arrangements of the 2. Self itself, self, other, other self. That's all you have. That's all you can have. So it's complete. It's exhaustive. Isn't that curious? Any one idea you want to understand, all you need is 2. What does that mean? What does it mean that we are in this reality? Hey, you and me, we're all in this. We wake up, we find ourselves in a world where any one thing is understandable using 2 things. And it doesn't apply to just physical things. It applies to excellence. It applies to being. Specifically, that's what we do our dialectics on in philosophy. And if you're into the Parmenides, it goes even one step beyond being. We talked about the first hypothesis being the one, not the one. Anyone who thinks the first hypothesis is the one is stuck in the old mistranslations. The great betrayals against philosophy. The text says one self. And of course, if you've gone through the series we have on this, of course it's oneself. It makes no sense if you didn't have oneself, because every argument rubs these 2 ideas together. And we go through all of them. So anyone who says there's just the one, it's absurd if you've gone through our playlist. And you can find that on YouTube. The first hypothesis of Parmenides. But why does he go on to the second? All of the ideas used in the first hypothesis to understand the ultimate term, our destiny, the cause of all causes, the one self, all of the terms used are explained in the second. For example, he talks about the first argument. The one self is not a whole, nor does it have parts. These terms are defined in their highest expression in the second hypothesis. So what? So you really got to understand the second to fully grasp the first. So what? Well, there are the second, third, fourth, and fifth hypothesis in Parmenides, and there is its rejection. The 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. What does that mean? If the one is and if the one isn't. Oh my goodness, that fits what we are seeing in the 4 categories of the dialectic, side A and side B. So what? We just said there is a secret first hypothesis, well, not really secret, he starts with it, but like another category sitting above the one self. Today we've been talking about there's a secret extra question that we were exploring together today in the chat. So our friend started his dialectic with what is cults. We wanted to explore cults. He had another one on the go as well, but we were talking about this first one. Now, that fits into definition. What is self itself? So we realized, hang on a second, if we gave birth to, in our reflection, a question, what could the title be? So that's another question that we don't formally address. What is the title? So a hidden question. So we have 4 categories here, but there is a cause above it, a hidden one above the 4. Now, that's a pattern. Put it into our skill trees. Skill trees. 2, 3s, 4s. Also, is there a kind of pattern where there are 5s? Oh my goodness, that's very thick. 5s. And is that hypothesis, if, question, is it a triad or a 4 with a 1 on top, like a dialectic? Now, we've already seen that there is a kind of structure with 4s of, we have lots of triads of Aphrodite, Hermes, Apollo. The virtues that we are playing with, that Socrates are playing with. I think we explored them because Socrates is talking about temperance and sound-mindedness. Okay, here we go. Here's our snowman. So this is our snowman, okay? We looked at the parts of the soul because Socrates is saying, hey, whether you're a man or a woman, you need temperance to manage whatever you're managing, a city or a kitchen. You need justice. You need to be a fair ruler. So it's the same virtues, even if you're applying it to a man and woman, whatever they're using it for. So what? So we have already got these virtues. Let's keep them in green. Temperance. I like temperance. It flows off the tongue better than sound-mindedness. Temperance. The low part of the soul, which is this corner of the triangle. Got courage, which goes together, but also this side of the triangle is a step higher. And what's above both of these? Hey, these are the 2 negative ones. I'm not negative. If you follow them, you're in trouble. If you're a lover of desires, you're a seeking of riches, philokrimatos. If you're motivated by this part of the soul, you want fame, philotimos. We need to be a lover of learning, philomethesis. That's our ticket into philosophy. So wisdom is above, or the hyparxis. But justice is above all of them. It requires all of them. So it's a monad above the triad. So we've got a kind of pattern that has unfolded for us in our reflection. So we give it a triangle here. So what? Well, can we use this shape to understand the dialectic? What would that mean? Well, which one would be the monad on top? Definition? Maybe synthesis analysis? Because it brings everything together. Justice, you need everything. Synthesis analysis, you need the other 4 together. But you could say, well, synthesis analysis allows you to see the first thing in a better way. So you can say, well, justice is the beginning, because justice means doing your intended purpose, and only that. So your intended purpose for your desire is temperance. Your intended purpose for your outward moving part of your psyche is courage. So it starts the whole game, but also it's the end of the whole game, which sounds like definition. Definition in our dialectic is the start of the whole game, and it's the end of the whole game. So can we use this as a model? Again, it's a hypothesis. We carry it and see if it pans out. It's not certainty. Can we say demonstration, division, synth analysis with definition on top? I don't know. You can make arguments for different ordering. We've already seen we have a triad as well that we use as kind of archetypal. Let's have a look. What other triads do we have already? It's us. All right, see this one here. We have Apollo, which is an activity of reading, which we're doing together here. Apollo gives us power, inspiration, when we see the meaningful connections ourselves. We get inspired. It makes philosophy not dry and dull, but meaningful. It gives us inspiration. It's a power we need to stay in the game. So this is an activity. This is the power we need for the activity. There's another reason why philosophy at the European academic tradition stink, because it doesn't have Aphrodite. I've had people say, hey, Parmenides is merely a logical exercise. Just Apollo. No reason for doing it. Which is one reason why it's so easy for them to reject the logos. It's just stupid. There's nothing is potent about that. Words have no meaning. It's just Apollo. We need both. Meaningful connections. Now, both of those, if you need to be in the game, where does the game lead? To what we're doing now, the dialectic. We're at the top of the game. So we can say, well, we could say there is an archetype that even this is following of activity, power, and the being, or sometimes called the ruling term. So there's another triangle. This is one that we often use to fill in the rest. We might realize I've got a power term. Let's figure out the other ones. What would be the use of the power? What would be the cause of the power or the goal of the power? Let's see that we can do that here. So when we're wondering, okay, how do we arrange these guys? Which of these is more like an activity? Well, we could make a case that division is an activity because that's where we do all the argumentation. Socrates had to go through an activity of saying, hey, health is the same for men and women. Strength is the same. And what was the other one? Size is the same. That's kind of activity, so maybe that should be over here. Or maybe you say, actually, synthesis analysis has more activity. It's literally two things. You're going to go through the activity of bringing this into this. This could power your activity, but your activity is really, the real activity is to conclude, to find the unity of that and then apply it back to the start. Another argument, well, it's the last term, so it kind of fits. You unfold from definition to demonstration to division to synthesis analysis, but then you revert from the end back to the top. Just like within the gods, this is called the anagogic. There are 4 triads of gods, and this is the last one. This is the activity. The activity we go through is this. Why? Because Hermes, it takes us back to the top. If our goal is to know thyself or reach our destiny, but it's also, so we call it the final cause, our goal, but also our destiny is the first cause of everything. Everything unfolds from our first cause, which might be the first hypothesis, the oneself, but our goal is to return it. That's how we complete the whole reason for all of creation. Our destiny of man. So the final term, the activity term, which has 3 parts, Apollo, Aphrodite, and Hermes, is the final term that reverts. So we could say, well, actually, if activity has this quality of reversion, what does that? Synthesis analysis literally reverts back to the top. So you could probably make a demonstration is a kind of activity, literally. So you can make a case for all of them. See what fits for you, what pans out, what's your highest vision and understanding, and what feels right for you, and carry that. Actually, if you can do 3 or 4, carry all of them. That's the game. These are hypotheses. Carry them with you. They're questions. So what? Well, is there a 5th term? A cause for the monad that causes the triad? Is there a cause that we were exploring in the Phaedo? A higher virtue? A virtue that you trade all the other ones in for? Socrates calls that phronesis. These that you put in through effort and activity and practice and nurture are only worth a damn if you can trade it in for this one, like trading in for a gold coin. So that has that reversion. You have to fully do all the other causes so you can reach the final cause. Let's use the physical causes as an example. We sometimes talk about the physical causes as the Aristotelian causes because he's a materialist. He left metaphysics, he left the tradition of Socrates and Plato, and that's the guy who we follow in our modern European academic tradition. But he has a bunch of causes. He has the first and final cause, of course. So building a house. Your final cause, your first cause is you need a house to live in. If no one needed a house to live in, nothing would happen to begin with. But then you need to have some sort of blueprint for how to fix a house. Then you need someone to do it. You need some builders. They need to have some sort of skill that gives them some sort of power. And you need some material causes like wood and nails and stuff like that. So you need wood and nails, but that wouldn't work without some sort of builder. And if the builder didn't have some sort of skill of building, he couldn't make use of them. So it's a mean, his skill is the mean between the doer and the done. And of course, he has to be following some sort of blueprint. So we see a diminishment of mind. The blueprint only exists in mind, or you could, you draw it on a map, but it's an idea. So it has a little bit of a physical expression. The builder has more of a physical expression than just the blueprints, but he's a human being, so he's very much in mind. His skill is demonstrated in the physical, and the wood and the nails is pretty much all physical. So, how do you know when the causes have been completed? When the people can put the key in the lock and get in there, and they've got a house to live in. So the need for the family to have a house begins the whole process, and you don't know it's completed until they get into the home. So they call it the first and final cause. So this is a metaphor. We're using the physical world in becoming, or the Aristotelian causes, to make sense of what are the higher causes in being. That's very important for our world. Why? Because the physical causes only, which are the causes that almost all human beings think in terms of, our society thinks in terms of, our institution thinks in terms of, these physical causes are sufficient for giving us our problems, our pathologos. And if you're following along in that read along of philosophical midwifery, then you might recognize the causes needed to give a child a problem. And all human beings have problems. So we're talking about Nancy having a huge problem that results in the defending and maintaining and supporting and doing of genocide. Well, like all human beings, it has a cause. We call that a pathologos. So the Aristotelian causes are sufficient to create problems, but the logos, the dialectic, isn't a physical Aristotelian cause. So while the way of thinking, the Aristotelian physical causes are sufficient for giving us problems, it is insufficient to solve them. Therefore, until we awaken philosophy, that's the name of the channel. We're always very happy when we say the name of the channel, right? Just like in that Speed movie with Neo. What's that guy who's Neo in the Matrix? When Neo in the Matrix in that Speed movie is in the bus and he goes, "We need more speed, otherwise the bus will explode." Everyone on the bus was like, "Yay!" He said the name of the film. Always very exciting. So we need to awaken philosophy because that's the logos. That's the discovery of the logos that we're doing in this channel. And that gives us a different set of causes. So in the dialectic, we know there is a what is and what isn't. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4 divisions. And maybe a hidden fifth we've been talking about today. These are the Aristotelian causes. What isn't? And as we said earlier, isn't doesn't mean non-being, it means only physical. Therefore, there is a 4 or maybe 5 set of causes reflecting the 4 or 5 hypotheses of Parmenides, or the 4 or 5 categories of the dialectic, whichever way you want to think of them, that involve the logos. The logos equivalent. These are needed to solve human problems. Which is why, after we killed Socrates and didn't pick up his logos game, we have been maintaining in our history thousands of years of genocide, speaking of genocide, bloodshed, torture, exploitation, capitalism, fascism, and so on. The list goes on. And we aren't learning from our problems, ever. Why? Because these cause problems, these are needed to solve problems. It's just that simple. And all we gotta do is pick up what Socrates gave us, a doorway into the logos, to solve our problems as a society, but specifically as an individual too. Humanity may or may not do this in time, but we can. In our soul. And in our reading of philosophical midwifery, we need to recognize the causes for the creation of our individual pathologos, the cause of our problems, and we need to learn the logos causes, or the what if the causes exist in being as the logos, or with the logos. We need to learn these so we can use them in our dialectic, in philosophical midwifery, to cure our own problems and the implications that follow from our problems. So cure our problems, our difficulties, our blocks, and so on. So that's what we're in here for. That's what we're doing. That's why we're in the game. And just for an example, I mean, play with it yourself if you see the significance of it. For an example, we said one of the Aristotelian causes, like building a house, was the blueprints. What would the blueprints be in being? Or what if you added logos to blueprints? What's that? I believe we have been calling that the paradigm. So that's one example. And have fun figuring out the rest. I'm not being a jerk, I'm encouraging you to have a question. So what? Well, we have been wondering about the cause for the dialectic. In the Phaedo, we've been wondering about the fifth virtue above justice. Now, if you want a language, we know that's a triad. Obviously, it's just three. Monad means one. But formally, in the Platonic tradition, if you want to sound smart and fancy, the name for a monad or a one that's even greater than the oneness or the unity of the whole. So if you consider monad to be the cause of and the unity of the whole, then a word that's a one that's beyond even that is henad. I hope you're confused by that word because I've been hearing it for many years and I'm still puzzled by it. And I haven't heard anyone who's given a sufficient explanation of the exact difference between henad and monad, but that's one that I just gave you that you can play with and see where it takes you. Nevertheless, we have a word that we can use and sound fancy. A henad above a monad above a triad. Woof. Okay, let's check in with chat. Carpentry. Noble houses. Okay. If we don't have aspirations like equality, justice, education, we're more animals than humans striving for improvement. Okay. Nietzsche doesn't walk the rope to superhero to the end. Right, and so we can take what we discover in someone in chat. Henad is the ness part of monad. Now that's a reference to a game that we play. Hey, we're talking about like greatness or healthiness in the example Socrates is using to Meno. Like a healthiness, well, we say that somebody has health, a woman has health, or a man has health, but what's healthiness as a noun? That's the cause. So some words have ness on the end, which we talk about it being the noun of something. Blackness is needed for this shirt to be black. Black as an adjective, blackness as a noun. So that's one thing to play with. Right, and so we can also take these division of the dialectic, what is and what isn't, and the categories, however you want to use them. Do you want to use the categories in terms of causes, 3, 4, and maybe a mysterious fifth? Do you want to take them in terms of causes? Do you want to take them in terms of dialectic? Do you want to take them in terms of levels of development, ways of thinking, hypotheses of Parmenides? You pick, but then whatever we want, we can apply to other thinkers in the European tradition or any tradition. How does Buddha use them? How does Nietzsche use them? How does Hegel use them? How does Donald Trump use them? To see what level that they've made. So this is the significance of having the blueprints of reason itself that we can apply to any person, any system, any tradition, any culture, any race on any planet at any time in any dimension. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Wow. Wow. Wow.
Owen Wilson's whole family is impressed with that.
Wow. Wow.
Look at them go. He's a very big family. What's that called? A blueprint with that, or the ness of blueprints, blueprintness. Paradigm. We're learning the paradigm. Logos could be used in that way. Answering chat, used as a strategy. but it is also is the paradigm. Yeah, it is. We're using it as a strategy in dialectic. We're using it as a strategy to compare Nietzsche with other people. So, lots and lots of fun and lots of significance, which is important because that's the Aphrodite. We're not just reading it to sound clever to our friends, although that's an added benefit. We're doing it because it's meaningful, and we need to do this unpacking to see the meaning, to inspire us, give us power. Whoops. Power? Is that power? Is that power? Is there a power in our heart that moves our feetsies at the bottom? So these are good questions. So nevertheless, we have a 5 on the table. And we were reflecting on the fact that, hey, as a principle, the dialectic is 2 terms that you need to understand one idea. What is excellence? What is beauty? Whatever it is. For us, it's what is excellence. It's one idea. You need 2 terms in the dialectic, self and other. It's interesting because if we push the implication, does that mean that we need the second hypothesis, understanding and Parmenides, to fully understand the first? Well, we could say the terms we use in the first all come from the second in the highest level. If the second is the brilliant light of being, or the highest experience of reality, the highest level of enlightenment, well, enlightenment as experience, if that's the brilliant light of being, then we need to understand it with the dialectic and logos. That's the second hypothesis, a dialectic on that. But that gives us the greatest experience of and the greatest understanding of the 2, which we use to understand the 1. Which some people think it's simply a negation. It's not beautiful, it's not just, it's not those things. It can't just be not it because it's the cause of it. It has to be it in some curious, confusing, puzzling way that you will only understand if you have the terms of the second that are used in a very, very curious way for the first. That's the puzzle of the first, which is another expression of needing the 2 to get to the 1. And why do we go down that road? Well, I don't remember, but it is interesting. Because we only have 2 ideas that we rub together. Interesting. So, we have Socrates on one hand, we have Nancy Pelosi on the other one in her interview with Stephen Colbert, doing none of these things. But in our one, we have a synthesis, and then the final thing is, okay, if these other things that we know as eidos or nesses, nouns in being, health, size, strength, us always the same, even if it's a big man or a big woman or a big dog. Therefore, conclusion, thumbs up. All ideas don't differ whether demonstrated in men or women. Meno says 2 thumbs up for that. Fireworks. And then that's not it. That's, you know, you haven't gotten him to the reversion part. Therefore, our SS category definition of excellence in relation to excellence also doesn't differ. Is to the demonstration. No. Yes and no, that's a tricky one. Within the hypotheses of Parmenides, the first hypothesis is the cause of what follows, whether one is and whether one isn't. The kind of existence that the one has is a puzzle. It's a one that is, that isn't, is. Because is, as we were saying before, is if it exists in being. Another word for being and existing in being is ousia. At the end of the first hypothesis, we define specifically that is or exists equals participate in ousia. But he concludes the one is in a way that doesn't participate in ousia. So we say if is means participate in ousia, then we can say the one is but also not is. That's the puzzlement. We're talking today about how our questions lead to puzzles, and every new insight gives birth to a bigger, fatter puzzle and question, and that's even more confusing. This should confuse the hell out of us because this is the big puppy. So you could say the first hypothesis is the cause of definition. The second hypothesis gives a definition of what happens if one is, or ousia. The third is its functioning through the logos. And then there's the fourth and the fifth. These are the four hypotheses, or definition, demonstration, division, and synthesis. So we can use what we're learning about the dialectic to make sense of Parmenides' hypotheses. So when someone comes along and says, no, Parmenides are just a logical exercise, you go, what the heck are you talking about, man? Who was your teacher? And what culture did you come from? And why did your girlfriend encourage this nonsense? Just as Socrates did with Meno. This is your lover, this is your culture, this is your teacher. Blah. But we don't poke out our tongues. We encourage them. We say, hey, play this game we're playing over on our channel. We say,
I don't want to eat a monkey.
We say, I don't want to eat a monkey. We say,
Come on, man.
You say, come on, man. And we do this with our hands. If you do this with your hands, people are like, oh, I want to do it. Yeah, come on, man. And they gasp and they say,
Come on, man.
come on, man. So on one level, yes. I mean, one level, no. But if you make the definition the first, then the second would be demonstration. So it really depends on the way you're looking at the whether or not you're including the cause of the dialectic. Normally we keep that aside for later. So what? So Meno says, so do you think that strength or size differs, men or women? Says Socrates. Synthesis, the first half of the conclusion. Meno says, no, not me. I don't disagree with that. Then the final, let's take it back to the beginning. Therefore, excellence doesn't differ in relation to excellence, self in relation to self. Whether it exists in a child or an elder or a woman or a man. Meno says, he does this. He says, no, not me. Get out of here. I don't think it's the same as, I don't think this case is the same as the other cases. I think this is a different one. I think those other cases, but not this case. All right. This can be frustrating dealing with these people. Hey, Nancy Pelosi, do you think it's okay to murder people who have nothing to do with their crimes? Of course not. That would be the height of injustice. What about all these Palestinian people you are murdering who have nothing to do with this other group that you call a terrorist? Oh no, but not in this case. In other cases the same, not in this case, different case. Ah, you got no principles, or a block, or you're stuck, or you're unwilling to follow the logos, or you're a bad actor. I don't know. Maybe Meno isn't that bad, but he said in this case, not like the other cases. Oh, thanks for the follow. Nozuya, thank you for the follow. Hope you find something to wonder about today. So, what did Socrates do? Okay. Well, you didn't accept a dialectic following the definition, the idea in being. What about how it functions? Let's look at how it functions. How does virtue demonstrate itself? He picks up the example he used, a man managing a city and a woman managing the kitchen. Because, hey, whatever you're managing, don't you need the virtues? The demonstrations of the virtues, what are they? Sound-mindedness and justice are 2 of the 4, or 5, the hidden 5th. So whoever manages does so with dikaios, justice, and sophrosun, temperance, sound-mindedness. Accordingly then, both men and women and men are in need of the selves, the ideas, because self means honorific, of justice and temperance. If you see, I say temperance instead of sound-mindedness. Too many syllables. Sound-mindedness, that's 4. Temperance is 1. Temperance, or 3. Temperance. The way I say it, it's 1. Justice and temperance, they're going to need it if they want to be good. So now we're not talking about the thing itself, but how it functions to meet a goal. Earlier we were talking about how to distinguish definition and demonstration. Well, we talked about a meat cleaver. What's its function? And there's a clue in the name. It's a meat cleaver. Meat cleaverer. It cleaves meat. So it's its function to reach a goal. To do what? Have nicely cleaved meat. So we have a goal that it's being used for. It's demonstration, functioning. The goal is to be good. So hopefully we have another question. What is this thing called good? Because if the excellence or justice of a soul is to reach it, then maybe it's beyond even these things. And if these things are an idea, once again, we have our mysterious 5th term. What is it? Well, if we talk about the virtues being in being, and we said being is kind of like the definition of reality, or ousia, this is in English, the definition of reality, or ousia, which is the second hypothesis of Parmenides, the definition, and its demonstration is the 3rd hypothesis. It's how the Logos speaks to us through the text, through our dreams, through the different texts that we've been reading on this channel. It's how this communicates to us. That's why we're on the hunt for the Logos. Then, if excellence is one of these things, but you take these things to be a function or have a function to reach a goal, then the goal must be beyond it. So what the heck is the good that is beyond even reality? So if we've got the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th hypotheses, the demonstration, the definition, demonstration, division, and synth and SA related to reality or related to one in the Parmenides, then we have that question, what the heck is this 5th term or henad above these 4? And if we can apply it to the hypothesis, what does this good have to do with the first hypothesis? Because the first hypothesis wasn't called the good self, it was called the one self. So what the heck is Socrates playing fast and loose with this idea of good, suggesting it might even be a goal, even of the virtues being used that come from being? Maybe that's a question. If it is, yes, is good, something to behold, then it might be in being. So maybe he's talking about the virtues in the realm of becoming. Well, he is. He's talking about a woman being a good housewife. To be a good manager of the house, she needs the virtues. So good in relation to the house. But a man is one step up, according to sexist, old-fashioned Meno and his terrible teacher, Gorgias. A man is one step up because he doesn't just manage the house. He manages the woman and the city. And let's go beyond a man to a philosopher. We do the virtues because ultimately we want to get phronesis. We want to behold reality itself, or the second hypothesis, the brilliant light of being. But is there a level beyond philosopher? Because if the virtues don't just exist in a housewife, don't just exist in a man, don't just exist in a philosopher to reach being, but exist in being, can they be taken as a demonstration to reach a good beyond it? Woof. What a question that would be. That Socrates is dropping on our asses that Meno might not pick up on, but we can pick up on if we do this kind of reflection. Aphrodite. See if we can see it create a whole. See if we can give rise to insights. Whip. So literally, we don't have to see that. We could just read it. Hey, let's just take the lesser. Yeah, just the good. Maybe even the lesser and the man and the woman. Yeah. So whether it's a man and a woman, both need justice and sound-mindedness if they're going to be good. Let's ignore the philosopher level and let's ignore the level beyond that, which is mentioned in the Parmenides, by the way. Even philosophers isn't the final goal. Philosophers seek to become something else. So, let's keep reading. Of course, we have an idea of what he's thinking. He's doing a dialectic on the demonstration side. So, as we said, turtles all the way down. We should be able to pull a definition, demonstration, division, and a conclusion. Let's keep reading, see what we see. So, hey, men and women both need to have this if they're going to be good. Have what? The demonstration of virtue, which is justice and temperance. And by the way, these are the two that the Greeks use when they talk about justice as a whole. Why is that? Well, easy, because here's our snowman. This is our soul. Our inner desires are a part of our soul. That's the bottom of the snowman. It should be last. Our outward moving, seeking truth should motivate us in our actions, but it all should be governed by wisdom, or the virtue of logos in the Greek, our reasoning part, or our participating in logos part. The English word is reasoning, but the actual word is logos, which is good that we can see that it's logos, because that's a big puzzle for us. So, what's interesting is courage is normally associated with this part of our soul. Wisdom is a part of is the virtue of how you logos. Wisdom. The virtue of how you outwardly move is courage. Your desires, however, sound-mindedness or temperance, isn't just your desires, it's having your desires and your outward moving and your reasoning all harmonized together with the same single goal in mind. So you could say sound-mindedness is all of those virtues of the psyche, all of the parts together. Justice is within all of them, of course. It's the monad. It's the cause of all of them, but it's also the final, or it's the virtue of what you do when you are harmonized. Hey, when you are a snowman, you're not an upside down snowman motivated by your desires. You're not a weird freak snowman with your arms in the top and your legs in the middle and your head down the bottom, seeking fame, wanting to be Instagram famous or something like that. You're not like that. You're a right side up. What do you do? What do you do with yourself? What can you do with yourself? Whatever you do, if you're doing your right purpose functioning, if there is a single purpose or meaning of life or reason why we're here, just like any other video game, if there is a goal, what you're supposed to be doing, then now that you are harmonized, you're not at war within yourself, you have temperance, you can now function as justice. So that's why these are kind of referred to as sound-mindedness, sophrosun, and so when the Greeks kind of mean all the virtues, they might use this word or they might use this word, and Socrates is using both. So that's just a little bit of info there for you, because he said, hey, dikaios, justice, sophrosun, temperance, you need all the virtues whether you're going to be good as a housewife or a man. Welcome back to Mustachio. Welcome back to Mustache in the chat. So, division. What about the young and the old? Can they ever be good while being undisciplined? Now, discipline might not be the right word because it's it's the word a followed by this word and a followed by this word, which means opposite to. Muchacho, okay. Muchacho. Do you have a mustache, muchacho? Machado? Do you happen to be mustached? Oh, you do? Well, so it was a apt nickname, right? Mustachio Muchacho. So, if I get it wrong, I actually didn't get it wrong. I just meant it as a term of affection, as an endearing nickname. Because I'm like Meno, I'm never wrong. So, the word is licentious, or pursuing your desires. We might say hedonistic, and instead of undisciplined, or unjust, obviously, unfair. So no, not even old people or young people. Therefore, they need to have temperance and justice. Yes. Therefore, all human beings are good in the self-same way. That's a puzzle. Why is self and same the same word for the Greeks? Big puzzle there. In the self-same way, for they come to be good when they happen upon selves. Oh, same. That's another question. Now, we know that we can read selves in that triad way, the particular. Let's read it in the particular. So we know, therefore, that all human beings, this is our synthesis, are good in the same way, for they come to be good when they happen upon them, the virtues, them, it. Now we can read it in the honorific. They come to be good when they happen upon the being of the virtues. Different level. You can do all three with the word self. They behold, okay, so they're good as children if they have their virtues, lesser. They reach the idea of the good if they happen upon the selves of excellence, and the ultimate. They come to be the good if they happen upon the self? Does that follow? Maybe. Could Socrates be hitting all three at once? So that anybody he is talking to or reading at any point in history, even 2,500 years later, can be getting any level they want based on where they're at? If so, could that be a level of excellence that only Socrates and maybe one other person I've met in my life has ever reached? Where he's having a conversation that can hit all levels at all times, so you get what you're ready for? Maybe. Again, a hypothesis. Put it in our hypothesis sack. And by the way, if we seek all three, even if we aren't at that level yet, even if we're just giving ourselves more questions because we don't see it yet, is that a level of excellence in terms of our reading? So we could say, hey, both men and women and old and young and philosophers in the awakening philosophy community reach the good in their reading if they happen upon these selves, thus self. Glad to hear you have a question. Oh, okay, you have a full beard, so technically you have a mustache. I don't think that's the same. Don't think that's the self same as a mustache. That'd be pretty funny though. Giving a friend in your group the name Mustache because he has a mustache. Well, he has a whole beard. You have another friend who's also got a full beard and you call him Sideburns. Technically. Be a strange group of friends. Then what if the self virtue was not indeed of selves? Then without a doubt, people would not be good in the self same way. Now that is a sentence that we have to unpack. Okay. All humans are good in the same way, for they come to be good if they happen upon the virtues. Then what if the self virtue, the virtue itself, not the particulars, the selves, but the self virtue, the excellence in being, was not of selves? Okay, so I think he's saying, okay, if we've applied it to the particulars, then the thing itself, excellence itself, if it was not of selves, of what? Sound-mindedness and justice, maybe? Or of young, old men and women? So he's either saying if young, old men and women did not have the self virtue, then they would not be the good. They would not reach the good in whatever they do, or the good itself. Or if he's saying if the selves here refer to the virtues, if sound-mindedness and justice were not aspects or demonstrations of excellence itself in being, then they couldn't reach the good, because the principle is to reach the good itself, you need the excellence in being. As we were talking about today, to really grasp the one self, sometimes called the good self, then you need the second hypothesis. To grasp the first hypothesis, you need the second. So he could be talking at that level too. If the self virtue was not of selves in being, so the self virtue, the virtue of the one self, was not in the selves in being, then people could not be the good, the one self or the good self, first hypothesis, in the same way. So really, it does apply to all levels. But let's see what the lesser level is by reading the non-Greek translation, the ones that we've been using up until Balboa. So again, we doth tip our hats in gratitude to Juan Balboa and his family for actually giving us a translation of Socrates. But we can jump into what we had to deal with before the Balboa translation and see, and it's can be fun to do because usually it's just the lesser. It skips the self altogether. and therefore misses the honorific and ultimate reading. So it can be fun to do, to compare. Let's try that one out. To space! We are now in space. Because the internet is in space. That's where it lives. So same section. So all mankind are good in the same way, for they become good when they acquire the same qualities, temperance and justice. Seeing that, indeed. So he just says it in the negative. They're not, hang on. Yes, so it seems. And I presume if they had not the same virtue, they would not be good in the same way. Same virtue, which has the same qualities. Justice and temperance. See, so no, they wouldn't be. So it's a negative. So saying yes, that's the case. Seeing then that it is the same virtue in all cases, doesn't matter if you're old or a woman, try and tell me if you can recollect what Gorgias and you have in agreement with him say it is. Okay, let's read that again. Whoever manages the house or the state temperately and justly would manage with temperance and justice. Yes. Then both men and women require the same qualities of justice and temperance if they are to be good, evidently. And what of a child or old man? Can they ever hope to be good if they are intemperate and unjust? Surely not. Only if they are temperate and just? Yes. So all mankind are good in the same way, for they become good when they acquire the same qualities. It's a principle for everyone. So he's raised. So this is interesting. So another way we can understand the use of division is use of a particular, raising it to a principle. Notice, we're doing what it is. And we talked about Nancy Pelosi trying to shout over and pretend she doesn't hear what is being said in that interview. You can look it up on YouTube. On the Colbert Show, Daily Show, or the Nightly Show, Late Night with Colbert. I don't know what it is. At the time of the last day of the DNC convention, 2024, she pretends not here, and then she ignores the question and just gives a bullshit response. And we don't ask her about principles. She has no principles. She doesn't care that she's genociding. But she would care if it was her being killed for something that someone up the street from her did. If someone up the street, I don't know, kicked a dog, she would be very upset if she went to prison. Or if some Wall Street person did insider trading, she would be very upset if she was punished, because she never does insider trading, because she's a principled politician, right? So if that's a principle, don't kill people for the actions of others, even if they happen to be living up the street. Then very quickly she would realize, oh gee, I guess we shouldn't be doing genocide to the Palestinian people. But she doesn't have that conversation. Colbert doesn't do that. He didn't learn it at school. Hopefully, this channel will become super popular and every school teacher in the world will pick it up and teach it to their kids every morning before morning tea. And then after morning tea, they can do other stuff like math. And I'm only half kidding, because that would literally be the best thing to do. Whether or not it's going to happen, we have yet to see. So that's what it isn't, right? No principles. Which is why politicians don't like to talk, because they know that they're corrupt. Because they don't care about the people, because they're under capitalism, and because capitalism uses money to exploit even politicians, not just workers, not just the environment, not just resources. It even exploits politicians. What do you know? It's almost as though we could have figured it out from day one, because that's what it is. If only we defined it and then see what would happen if we demonstrated capitalism and divided it up. How would it end up in politics? How would it end up with the environment? How would it end up with genocides? We might have even been able to learn our lesson about the dialectic of what happens if capitalism exists without having to play it out in real time. What a world that would have been if only someone had picked up a Balboa copy of Socrates. Well, no use crying over spilt milk. We can learn, and we can do it next time. Let's prevent the next genocide by everybody picking up and reading in this way. What way? Raising in the division level of the dialectic from the particulars that you've divided up to a principle. The principle is all mankind. It's a principle. Even Palestinians, even Nancy Pelosi are good in the same way, almost as if divisions by nationality or race or what bit of dirt you happen to be born in doesn't make a gosh darn difference. So you are being stupid by murdering them because all mankind are good in the same way. Wow. What do you know? No more racism or sexism or oldism or young peopleism. Oh, wow. Everyone read the Meno. And confetti? No, confetti? Yes, confetti. Hooray. Hey, just read the first, how many pages? 5 pages. That's all you need. If you realize all people are, what's the principle? Notice how simple it is. This isn't a complicated argument, especially if you know the structure he's following. It's just following a blueprint. Only a blueprint that is universal and has the logos in it and leads you to truth, which is called paradigm. It's not hard. Hey, to manage a city, do you need the same justice and temperance? Yes. Oh, same with women in the house? Yeah. Same with kids and old people? Yes. Therefore, conclusion, what's the principle? Where is it? Back a bit. All mankind are good in the same way because they become good when they acquire the same qualities. So what? So, does genocide give you the qualities of justice and temperance? Oh, it doesn't. Oh, didn't stop it. Does providing a universal basic income for everyone at the same levels and then using our intelligence to use the technology and resources we have to share the planet and our understanding completely to just efficiently, rationally, and sustainably match the resources with the human needs in a way where we don't have to work anymore, freeing us up to read the Meno? Does that allow the conditions for us to acquire the qualities, the same qualities that make all men good? Yay, it does. Hooray. So do it. If only it was that easy. But that's why we have this book. Why? Because we're humans and we've developed problems from childhood that prevent us following simple, obvious, two-step, no, it's not 2 steps, but it's almost 2 steps, very simple reasoning for a very simple structure. We have false beliefs that we don't even realize we have, that we live according to, and we're blindly obedient to. And we need to apply this same reasoning, not to the truth of virtue, but also to the truth of the image of virtue that caused our false beliefs we don't even know we have. So it doesn't matter if we're telling the truth. Hey, Nancy Pelosi, have principles. All men are made virtuous in the same way. So just stop doing genocide and capitalism and instead do what we just said. She'll say, "Well, I can't hear you. And politics is complicated. You wouldn't understand, Suddy. By the way, get me 4,000 more shares in this company I know is going to blah, 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 blah." She would say that, predictably. Why? Because there is a natural counterattack to truth and change in all people, which is why we need to be good faith actors, actively asking questions and seeking the truth, not playing out roles where we confirm our ignorance by pretending to be smart and clever and wise. Nancy Pelosi, I know more than you study. Even in the philosophy tradition, I'm a philosopher. Unless you've read Kant and Nietzsche and Hegel, I can dismiss your opinion. Who cares? You're gatekeeping. It's nonsense. So, people generally interested. And our question is Meno one of those people? Or does he have a pathologos? Or maybe he's got one and it's addressed. Good questions. Let's check in with the chat. Even war crimes against Palestinian. Yes. Not arguing with Netanyahu. Right, so he might be a bad... Well, yeah, obviously he is. Name of book? Doesn't that very statement imply that every type of human, every race, every nationality, and both of the sexes are able and willing to achieve the qualities that would make a good human being? And does imply that what makes a good human being is objective? Well said. Now, that natural propensity that, as you explained, and please send that in an email to Nancy Pelosi or your local politician or whoever, because it's great that you saw that, and it's great that you phrased it in that way, and it's great that you shared it with us, but it needs to be shared with everyone, which is maybe one of the reasons why we're doing this book as well on the channel. How do we share this with everyone? And also we have to find a way of phrasing that statement in a way that sidesteps or equally addresses the blocks we have to that innate natural predisposition for seeking truth and virtue, that we wouldn't have problems if we didn't have, because it's the appearance of being, truth, goodness, reality, virtue, not in being, but it's the appearance that makes problems have their power. So if we weren't naturally seeking it, every human being, every race, every sex, then we wouldn't have the conditions for our problems. So the fact that we have problems is further evidence of the fact that it is universal. So don't bother putting a blue shirt on that team and a red shirt on that team and go out killing blue shirts or go out killing red shirts, or buy a news network and call it Fox News, even though it's not a news channel. That has been settled in court, that it's an opinion channel, and everybody knows that. Therefore, don't sue us for lying. And use that propaganda network to say, we must kill all blue shirts, because they don't want to learn, or they don't seek reality itself, and they don't seek the virtues, and they're not made good in the same way. What's a way of saying that? Evil. Evil. The fantasy of evil, which is what? Problems are not caused by a misdirection or a usurping of our desire for virtue. Therefore, people who appeared virtuous before we learned the logos as children, we walk away with a false belief about ourselves that dictates our way of being. No. It's not that or ignorance that causes human problems. It's this evil guy with horns and he's got superpowers and he knows everything. He's like Santa Claus in that way. And he never wants the good. Somehow he has all of the qualities of goodness itself to be omnipotent and supernatural and all-seeing, but he has an innate contradiction within him that even though he has all of these good qualities, he somehow doesn't seek good. He wants the very thing that would destroy those qualities, badness. We'll call that evil, and we'll call that the devil. And then anyone that we don't like and we want to play out our problems against and feel our sadistic joy and sadistic pleasure in harming other people and the righteousness of harming other people when we cosplay being wise, yes, we'll call them evil. Because you can't reason with evil. Reason doesn't want virtue. And we'll give them a nickname. We'll call them vermin or cockroaches or, I don't know, whatever Hitler called the Jews. Vermin, I think it was. Whatever we call whatever the Americans and Jewish state calls Palestinians. I don't know. It's going to be something that implies they're less than human or that they are evil. Good thing they have a religious tradition that has that fantasy of evil and not ignorance. When I say good thing, I'm being facetious. It is itself one of the causes for them to justify not doing logos. Anyway, the idea that reality is a battleground of good and evil is one of the hypotheses, one of the negative ones. So we can recognize even that way of thinking within the dialectic, applied to Parmenides, applied to ways of thinking about reality. I think it's the seventh. But we'll have to get into the seventh, get into the Parmenides to see which one it is. But seventh, much lower than the first and second, which we've been talking about. Therefore, hey, let's learn the dialectic, learn how to apply it to the Parmenides hypothesis, which is applying that same dialectic paradigm, not just to parts of conversation, but to the one. That's the Parmenides. Because if you think about reality in any way, it's got to be a one. One reality. How do you understand reality? You're pointing out one thing apart from other things. Not how do you understand math, it's how do you understand reality? Or how do you understand God? It's always a one. So if you have a dialectic about all of the different ways of thinking about one, then you'd have a dialectic thoroughly exhausting all of the different ways of thinking about and experiencing reality. To every religious tradition, political tradition, economic tradition that can and will and has ever and will in the future exist, you can, get ahead of. Understand. But also, if you develop it as an art like Socrates is doing with Meno, maybe you can use that, the paradigm, the dialectic and the logos, applied to the one or the Parmenides, along with how we are seeing Socrates use it with Meno, to recognize someone in the seventh. Reality is a battleground between the devil and the good. Jesus, Allah, Muhammad, Joseph Smith, whoever. And reason them through the stages of the seventh hypothesis to see the necessity of its opposite. What's the opposite of the seventh? The third. Why? Because just trust me, bro. No, that's Nancy Pelosi talk. Why? Well, if we were saying, as a hypothesis, again, don't believe this guy, just let's see it for ourselves and master it for ourselves. If we have the second, third, fourth, and fifth hypothesis of if one is, of course we have the first, that's Parmenides hypothesis of his self from the self, that's over here. But if we had the one is, and if the one is not, or doesn't exist, one is not, then we have 6, 7, 8, and 9. Definition, demonstration, division, analysis. Then, they're in the 7th. It's okay to kill people because the only way of solving problems is to kill the devil, because all problems are caused by the devil. Hey, what about your problems? Shut up. What about the other people in your church? Have you ever met someone who's done a sin at church? You're going to kill them too? Anyway, it's not going to be, you're not going to help them in reasoning in that way, because you have to first find why they believe that. And it won't be through reason, because there's no reason for that way of thinking. It'll be this game. Nevertheless, get around the blocks or size up the blocks in some way by using this understanding of the paradigm applied to the Parmenides, or one, along with what we're seeing in the Meno of it applied to dialogue, not debate broing him. So all of the, don't be mean. At least if she's open to talking about Nancy Pelosi or whatever. Anyone in the 7th, show them the necessity of its opposite, because each of these opposites take for granted certain things that are only in its opposite. Therefore, they are seeing the possibility of there being a this. By the way, that's where the logos comes in. Also, you might be able to show them, here is a complete way of understanding your tradition. That might spark something in them. Oh my God, my whole way of thinking can be understood completely as a whole? Yep. Wow. By who? By anyone. But also, it's only a part within a greater whole. That might wake them up, because most people think that their worldview is the whole worldview. So we talk about especially people who have a lot of ignorance or are very tied to their pathologos, conservatives, right-wingers, we sometimes call them. They often, what's the saying? That's a meme right now. Every accusation is a confession. What's that mean? They all project their injustices onto others. They think everyone is a criminal. They think everyone is exploiting people. They can't imagine that the left or the progressives actually want to help people, because they never want to help people. Why? Because that's their whole worldview. Their worldview is everyone's worldview. But by showing a complete understanding of that, and that it's a part of a greater whole, it might wake them up to maybe moving up to the next one, or moving across to the opposite. These are movements that you can make. And ideally, I guess that would be what Socrates might be using. Again, it's just a hypothesis. It's just a theory. A dialectic theory. So, that's something we can think about. Because, hey, you know what they would do? They'd kill you if you disagree. Why? Because there's no logos over here. Logos is here and up. Anyway, we are not limited by their ignorance, but maybe we could see it as a great gift. A gift to apply our mastery of the dialectic that we're learning together to the most important things. Stopping people in the 7th who are very pro-genocide. Because, hey, onward Christian soldiers marching as to war, as we sung in Catholic school. Okay, let's get rid of that. So that's what, that's a possibility for us down the line. Let's get back into the text. So let's check in with the chat before I get too far away from it. It's not a problem of race, it's a problem of culture. Oops. Blaming race is not going to be able to become good. It's off the rails. Culture. Well, it's whether or not your culture embraces what we are doing. So are you in the awakening philosophy culture or the logos culture? Can you rephrase this? Okay. Certain race gave birth to a certain culture. Human problems. Yep, human problems. What is a human problem that bleeds into everything? The problems you gain that shut down the logos. Why? As Socrates is telling us, everyone is a certain level of up the ladder of the logos towards our destiny. But everyone as a human being, because of the desire to seek that, its reflection or shadow has the ability to trap us. So if you were born in a German house in the 1930s, you might get a false belief to do with, what was their thing? Not obedience, what was it? So Hitler appeals to it, so everyone votes and follows Hitler. Duty above all, duty. So we call them dogs because they follow duty above everything, even if it's duty to Hitler. And when Hitler, what's the word? Not resigned, gave up. Whatever that is. When Hitler gave up, you no longer have your duty. And so these fierce German soldiers who felt like they were going to take over the world all of a sudden became pussycats. And gave up because they no longer had the duty. They were no longer motivated by their particular pathologos problem within the household that the politicians adhere to. You know, pick any country. What does Putin appeal to? Putin wouldn't fly in America, but Trump wouldn't fly in Russia. Certain kind of pathologos that they have within their family, time frame, culture. It's caused by the family that has to be supported by the culture, which is often conditioned by the religion, which is also conditioned by the evolutionary time period that we're in, which goes back to being a caveman. So there's duty that manifested in German families in the 1920s, supported by the culture of Germany at that time, supported by the certain religious mythology, also of duty. Goes back to cavemen surviving evolution before we even had logos. Your duty is to obey the cave leader, because if you go outside the cave, you'll get eaten by a tiger. And so therefore the people who were duty beyond reason and didn't explore their curiosity and wonder or their independence, they survived that period of evolution. That was very strange because we had that asteroid that changed a lot of things. Anyway, it's a causal chain, but we can go even beyond that. Why even have the evolutionary causes to cultural causes, religious causes, family causes? Why even do that? Why be born or reincarnated at all? Almost as if these happen for a reason, so that every one of us gets a question about what is, because we forget the truth that we experienced before we were born, according to the Phaedo and Socrates. Because hey, this stuff that we're talking about, we've never seen excellence. You know, walk down the street and bump into excellence in the supermarket. Sorry, I thought I was next to pay for my beans. No, I was here. Oh my God, it's excellence. I haven't seen you in years. How's it going? Oh, pretty good. How's the kids? Oh, excellent. Oh, that's very temperance of you to ask me about my family. Wow. Oh, it's nothing. Oh, come on. That's very courageous of you to be so humble, Temperance. Beans, I say. By the way, do you know that if you eat too many beans, you fart a lot? Wow, you have a lot of wisdom, Excellence. Why, yes, wisdom is one of my qualities. We've never had this conversation at a supermarket because it doesn't exist in being. We've never seen it with our senses. Then how can we even have this conversation? That's one of the arguments Socrates outlines for us, helping us see that we must have experienced this thing called being, which has these aspects, including the aspect or eidos of excellence, that we forget about what it is. So every human being has a question about what is, but every human being, having been born into a family, before we learn the logos, the art of the logos, which we're learning here together, gets a false belief from the image of that dear mama, dear papa, or whatever surrogate you happen to be born into. Everyone on your street, everyone on your block. Look across the street, you might see your neighbors yelling at their kids and go, oh, what a horrible father that is. They don't think that. They're thinking about yours. See? It's a principle. It ain't personal. Don't be like Nancy Pelosi. Say, oh, no, it doesn't apply to this situation. Doesn't apply to my religion, my family, my culture, my time period, my race, human race. That's not very excellent. So every human being, it ain't personal. It's not a blame game. You are not to feel like you are to blame for having problems. That's stupid and mean and gives up the whole reason we have these things to begin with, the whole reason we evolved from cavemen into these different things to create the conditions for us to be here right now, to discover the logos and wake up to our destiny. That's all destroyed if you play the blame game. So don't try and defend your ignorance. That's a problem. Why? Because our society says, hey, if you defend your ignorance, if you can get away with it, we won't punish you. We should be catching people who are making mistakes so we can help them like Socrates does. Anyway, if we give up that nonsense, we realize that there's even a condition for that. Because we get a problem, we forget what is, and then we get what isn't. Therefore, if the same paradigm or logos is used to reach truth and used to solve our problems in philosophical midwifery, then we are being forced to, simply by being living human beings and having a mind keeping our problems alive, having dreams that keep our problems alive and also give you clues, having the logos reflected through these texts that we read, creating the conditions for you to master the dialectic. And you can't just master it in finding what is, because that would be half of the game. So in chat, sometimes somebody has a hypothesis and we encourage them to do a dialectic, or they have an opinion and we say, hey, take that opinion, phrase it as a question. What kind of a question? What if X exists? Because no one cares about your opinions. Why? Because opinions are dumb. You don't have to be right in your opinions. Opinions is, hey, this is what I grew up with. This is what my family thought. And they only thought that because their family thought that. And their culture and their upbringing and their heritage and their religion, all the way back to the cave. Who cares? That's what opinions are. Now, some people think that's what philosophy is. That's the modern tradition. Because Socrates says, hey, if you don't pick up what I'm laying down, folks, the people who claim to be philosophers will be lovers of opinions, philodoxia. That's what we're dealing with right now. This is a whole different way of understanding philosophy. So anyone who comes in thinking, I'm a philosopher, you're wrong. Probably. Now, it's not a blame game. That's what Socrates told us. Why? Because philosophy isn't about debating your opinions or regurgitating Kant's opinions and his opinions from his family and his upbringing and blah, 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 blah. Same thing. So what we encourage is, hey, take that opinion, phrase it as a question. That's what people care about, because we can share questions. To have a question is to be on a quest. It makes you open, curious. Not a Nancy Pelosi, I know everything and shut up while I kill people. I can't hear you, she said. Put it as a question. Now, what kind of question? Don't just throw a question mark at the end of your opinion. A kind of question that we're learning in the dialectic, which is simply what? It's very, very simple. What are you interested in? Okay, I have an opinion about what, well, let's use this one, excellence is. Okay, if excellence exists, that's it. Just 3 words. That's the question. That's the kind of question we want. Why? It identifies what you're focused on. It applies it to the realm of being, which is what we're after, because our questions are two. What is truth in being? What is reality itself? Not its expression as adjectives in the physical world. But hey, doesn't the physical world need principles to keep doing whatever it's doing? Don't you have a mind? Don't we talk about excellence that you never see in the physical world? You might see adjectives, but where did you not notice the thing itself? Also, hey, if you think excellence doesn't exist, great. That's part B. That's part A. Part B is if X, or in this case, excellence, does not exist. If your opinion, and if it's an opinion, it might be in this category, is that there is no such thing as excellence, you still get to phrase your opinion and look at it and share it with each other, and we can carry it and hold it as a hypothesis, only you're not being closed-minded bigot and saying only this, you're also being a good faith actor with an open mind, genuinely curious, entering the human race, being rational, or playing the game by allowing both. And if you're doing the dialectic, you can do the definition of what it would be if it does exist, what if it doesn't, how it would demonstrate itself, division, how it plays out in politics, if excellence is just an opinion, or if it's actually like Socrates is saying, universal and true, doesn't matter who you are. You can do both. And you can share it. And we can be on a quest together. And others who've gone through that particular one might be able to know what questions to ask from experience. Or those who are more open to following the Logos might be able to ask the questions because they're more naturally receptive. They've been practicing looking for the Logos in these texts, practicing looking for the Logos in their dreams. So Logos is always communicating for us at all times for our benefit. It's just a matter of how receptive we are to it, which is something we might not realize unless we are doing a dialectic on what if Logos is. In, what does exists mean? In being. The more we see that being exists as that third hypothesis, the more we can be open to being open to it. By the way, the more we do midwifery or the dialectic applied to what isn't, the more we'll be free, or the less tangents that will distract us, the less inner critic says you can't do it, the less doubt we will have to being receptive to the Logos, allowing us to ask questions with our friends in chat about whatever question that they have. You can't do any of that with opinions. What do you do with opinions? Make people feel bad if they don't agree with you, or shoot them or genocide them if they don't agree with you, if you have that level of power. And give cookies and flowers to people who already have the same opinion as you, and then join groups. That's the level of opinion. Debate bros. Or, war and stuff. But we don't have to do that. All you gotta do is phrase it as a question. Then you're on a quest.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
It's a different way of being. Now, your family might say, no, not in this house. In this house, we all act certain. Because that makes you cool. Gets you chicks. Hey, you never rise on the corporate ladder if you have questions. You gotta act like you know. Let me tell you something, son, says Dad one day when you were young. No one knows anything. They're all bullshitting. The whole world. Yeah, I've been in the corporate game for 50 years and none of them know anything. In fact, the more higher up the corporate chain they are, the less they know. You know what gets them up there? Confidence. Never be open, never be curious, never share questions. Always act like you know. And you know what? The wimps will back down. And you walk away from that going, wow, that's what virtue is. Says Meno about Gorgias, maybe. That's what we have to sacrifice. But you know what? If you're sacrificing that ignorance to be in this game, which changes everything, you also have to sacrifice your image of dear daddy who rises through the corporate ladder because he knows what it means to be a C word. You can't say that really. You say it in Australia. You have to give up the image of him being loving and caring and dear old daddy. Now, it's very easy to give up that image of your next door neighbor's dad, or the guy up the street's dad, or even LeBron James's dad. The difficulty that requires courage and temperance and justice is giving it up about the one that you were raised with. Now, logically, it's absurd because, well, hang on a second, as a principle, why defend your one and think everyone else is wrong? Isn't that the same for every group? They think their religion is right, but the other 999 are wrong? That seems absurd. Of course it is. But it was never learned based on reason. Wisdom is to follow the reason. Courage is to hold on to reason even though it feels otherwise. Temperance is to keep your cool when you're doing that. Justice is to do it at all times. That's true for everyone. So, even though we can understand problems, we can say, hey, and it sucks to live in a world that's motivated by a dialectic of what isn't because we left Socrates, only now are we picking him up. We can say, well, actually, it could be for the good because it forces us to do both sides. You can't get away with just discovering truth. And what happens? Well, hey, there are some gurus who, in different traditions, stumble upon what is, but don't learn the dialectic applied to their problems, and we have archetypes like the pervy sage or the drunken sage or whatever. They have their problems still. They're not free. You're not really free, fully enlightened. But hey, someone who has been practicing the logos by having questions in this game might meet them for a coffee, and because I said coffee,
Wow.
that means we will have a drink of our coffees. That's our fun game that we play. We like to have fun here. We like to have fun. You meet that whatever guru and say, hey, I've been learning this weird thing with these bunch of weirdos in this weird channel on this weird Discord group called Awakening Philosophy. And I've been learning this weird game called Dialectic. Can I ask you some questions? Are you open to questions? Or is your tradition so flimsy and weak that you have to run from questions? It couldn't stand questions. I'll say, oh no, of course no. This is the truth. Do you know how far back our spiritual lineage goes? Tens of thousands of years, they might say. Great. Let me play this game. Let's see where it goes. So, and maybe you can ask them questions and see where their block comes up, and if they've got the virtues, ask some questions about that. Now, let's see if Socrates is doing just that with Meno. Before we do, let's check in with the chat. What is a human problem? Just talked about that, so we got off on. Labeling my views as race realism, just racism. Inherent qualities between races is a form of prejudice. Yes, well said. That's what we're seeing. We all have, it's like saying, oh, well, you've got cancer, but you've got leukemia. How can you have a doctor that it can apply his medicine to different illnesses? Well, there must be a paradigm of health that a doctor learns. So yeah, the Germans have a different culture. If you grew up in the Middle East in the 1400s, you're probably going to have a pathologos that fits with Islam. If you're in the ancient Athens, you probably have one that fits with the Hellenic tradition. It's not inherent. It's just following causes. Long-haired, it doesn't matter what your hair is. Racism is defined from hating on a specific race. Right, yeah. So all we could say is yeah, where does that hate come from? Is it based on an ignorance that doesn't understand causes? Right. What causes your problem? The devil. Oh, you're in the 7th. What causes your problem? The color of your skin. Absurd. They're wrong, but we want to see what is the cause for that wrongness. Is it a simple prejudice? Because some prejudices, when you introduce evidence, can be changed. But pathologos is not changed by evidence and reason because it wasn't learnt through evidence and reason. So, yes. Okay, so the inability or unwillingness to acquire certain qualities. Thus, your question is the inability or unwillingness to acquire certain qualities a human problem that bleeds into everything or inherent trait of race and culture? My answer is they're both true. Mankind is general, might not want to or is not able to acquire certain triads. Some in regard to the good, yet there are some substantive differences between race when it comes to the ability. I have not seen anything demonstrated that suggests that men or women or different colors or different sizes of noses affects mind. I think what we're after is mind. It's not a physical thing that affects your ability to participate in mind. It would be a mind thing. So that would be an Aristotelian view. Physical causes the mind. So as we said, Aristotelian causes give you the conditions to develop pathologos and prejudices, but you need the logos to realize, oh, we're talking about being, which is mind. Not your eye color or skin color or any other thing. Now, people who prey on pathologos and prejudices to get into power, fascists, do point to physical differences because any idiot can see a man and a woman or a black and white skinned person. And that's who they're trying to manipulate to vote against their own interests so they can take their money and keep them poor and take away social services and all that sort of thing. So yes, even the most ignorant can see the difference between black and white color. But if you misunderstand the logos, if you don't have a tradition of understanding the logos or being, then, well, hey, isn't everything caused by physical causes? That's what I learned by my Aristotelian European academic tradition based on physical causes. As Socrates is helping us see in the Phaedo, that's what he was into. Anaxagoras was the only one interested in mind as a cause. So we want to know what causes minds. Hey, maybe certain minds are not able to or receptive to the logos. In which case, we can still help them go as far as they can, and we can examine what were the conditions for them to develop such a strong block to their own benefit and enlightenment so that we can create the conditions in this society so it doesn't happen. Every criminal should be treated the same way. What were the conditions for you to develop this false belief? Maybe it was wealth inequality and you were doing the best thing you could at the time, in which case, let's change societal causes. Let's change the system to get rid of wealth inequality. So how can we create understand the causes within society so we can change the institutions? And how can we help you go through the process of the dialectic as Socrates is with Meno to address your own personal problem? So yeah, so as we were saying, Aristotelian or physical causes is sufficient to create problems, but is not sufficient to understand the cause of them and remove them. We need a new set of causes that applies to being or the logos. Jack Forrest, welcome to the chat, Jack Forrest. I hope you're having a fun time. I hope you're puzzled by the dialogues that are happening and you're curious and hey, even frustrated. Why not? So long as you have a question tied to your frustration. That was the topic. Okay, he was just helping out. General, not certain. Okay. Knowing and choosing the opposite because individuals are not atomic beings. Okay. Individuals are not atomic beings. All right. Needs to be connected to the cause of your argument. If added together, these people to race, you say that race prevents them. Right, yes, it's not race, it's mind. That's racism by definition. That very thing must be true. What trait limits you? What physical trait? Race is more than external figures. Okay, so you better have some evidence that suggests that certain races are limited in their psyche or soul. That would be very hard to see. I've never seen any evidence of that kind. Oh, they're minds. Depends on which group you're about. For example, Africans, low IQ. Low IQ and low testosterone. That's not true. Now, that might be a prejudice. In other words, if you see that someone who happens to be born on that piece of dirt can participate in mind just like everybody else, your view might be changed. Now, you might be an example of the opposite. An African might look at you and say, oof, you still think psyche is tied to physical causes and not psychical ones? Therefore, whatever color you happen to be, all people of that sort are low IQ people. Now, if you are able to follow the logos and you seem to be open to it, and you wouldn't be here if you wouldn't be, then you can show, well, no, I have, like all human beings, there's certain beliefs I have because of the same reasons. I am in this channel to learn those reasons. I am learning because I recognize I don't know them, but that's okay. I'm not like Meno defending my beliefs. I'm like Socrates, says I don't know. I've never met anyone who knows. Even me, I want to know. That's why we talk. There's no dualism to body and soul. They're one and the same. Oh, okay, that would be, okay, so now we've identified a causal belief. If you think there's no difference between soul and body or being and becoming, then we would have to ask you questions either on why that's the case or take you through the hypotheses to go from the negative ones, which is a rejection of being, just physical, the Aristotelian ones, to philosophy, which is specifically the study of the non-physical. In the Phaedo, Socrates says our whole goal is to separate our soul from the physical senses. So if you think there's no difference between the body and the soul, you're not in the game of philosophy. So according to the Phaedo, which we're reading together, which you might not have read or have heard of, philosophy is nothing other than the study and practice of death and dying. You have blah, blah. So yeah, so check out the Phaedo, Last Philosopher, and maybe you won't be the last philosopher. Maybe you'll have some good questions to share with your friends over a cup of coffee. Just a poor phrasing of your questions, blah, 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 blah. I don't believe in metaphysics. Oh, well, good thing metaphysics isn't a belief. Belief is a cognitive function below dianoia. That's why we're learning the dialectic. Dialectic is a way of using our understanding. Notice the question is, what if it exists? That's the fundamental title of every dialectic, which is in being. So we're using our understanding directed towards being. So Parmenides pointed this out right at the beginning. Before Socrates even began his philosophical journey, Parmenides says, hey, look, there are certain conditions you have to meet. Here's a quote. Collect thyself together by exercising more in that way that appears useless to the many. You will be a rare cat, the dialectic. It's called empty talk. If you don't, while you're still young, the truth will elude you, Socrates. Goes on to say, his student, Zeno, says the many, whoops, there's two things happening at the same time. Let's get rid of that. Okay. The many are ignorant that without this discursive procession through all beings, the dialectic, it's impossible to hold on to the truth. These are all from the opening of the Parmenides. Check it out on YouTube. I've got a playlist for it. Okay, so here's how we do it. Here's how you end the game. Permit the ideas of real beings to be. You got to start with that openness to being. Keep your mind fixed on your objections or counterattacks. define each one of the particular ideas. We are doing excellence right now in the Meno. There's the beauty in the symposium. There's lots of them. Aspects of being. Define each one. That's where to turn dianoia, kind of understanding, not belief. We don't care about what you believe in. We care about understanding the truth. Allow each idea of each one of the real beings to be of the self, allowing your doorway to go even higher beyond being. And also, when you encounter being, you recognize it as yourself. People who have experienced the realm of being, they all say this: oh, it's me, it's the self. I didn't realize, I forgot. This is the power of dialectics. Now, what's the danger? Well, if you're so close to the existence of being, you can't even play the game. You might get a lot of fame, or your parents might pat you on the head for being a good Nazi to the family tradition. You blindly obey our family tradition. You're a good kid. They will say, every family is it. It isn't a blame game. It is not personal. Don't take it personally. It's a principle. Taking it personally is missing the point. It's ad hominem. Okay, now, there is a problem. When Socrates was 19 and met his teacher Parmenides, he was a brilliant kid, and you can look at the opening, we read it together, and you'll find out what makes him so brilliant. Parmenides also said something very important. He said, the greatest problem. Now, Socrates said what he calls the greatest defect of the soul, but his teacher Parmenides said, here is the greatest problem. Where is it? We've got it as a quote. This. The greatest problem. So that one who hears these words is puzzled and questions whether these selves in being do exist in being, or if they do exist, they exist in the highest degree. So it appears abundantly necessary that selves must be unknown by human nature. We can't know them. And whoever speaks in this way may appear to be saying something important, as though it is an extraordinary statement. And whatever you say, they're unpersuaded. This is the cause of the problem. Someone who can't change their mind says you can't know being, or we could add being doesn't exist. But he says the consequence of that is I don't think we kept it as a quote. Even if you find someone skilled in the dialectic, where is it? Maybe it's up the top. Here we go. Here we go. This is the greatest problem, right? Here we go. The following is the greatest puzzle. Even if following the proof through many elaborate details, dialectic, from one practiced and experienced and with natural talent, even then, he who contends that the idea selves being are unknowable may still remain unpersuaded. Because of that other quote we said, people appearing wise and not changing their mind. So, if you find yourself watching this video or in chat and you say there is no such thing as real beings or that they are knowable, even if you're talking to someone else in chat or on the Discord channel who is naturally talented and very great at the dialectic and is practiced and takes you through the steps of reasoning, you might come to the conclusion, like we saw Meno in the previous argument, and say, nah, sorry, I'm unpersuaded. Parmenides says that's the greatest puzzle, the greatest human puzzle. Why might that be the greatest puzzle? How can you get into metaphysics? How can you discover the nature of being and truth? How can you master the dialectic that you're supposed to keep your eye on the idea of being to do the dialectic? If you are convinced, certain, even before playing the game, that it doesn't exist. I don't have to take a plane to LA. I know there's no LA. Well, no, we'll just take the plane and check it out. No, it doesn't exist. You can take a plane and understand why it must exist. That's the dialectic. No, it doesn't exist. Not only can you understand it, dialectic, you can verify it by going to LA yourself. That's called nous, the ability of human beings to experience the realm of being. That's the purpose of the dialectic. You can go to LA, check it out. You can verify for yourself. That's the game. No, convinced LA doesn't exist. Okay, not only can you experience it, well, what about the other people who have experienced? They're all wackos, they're all delusional. All of them, even Socrates, widely accepted to be the greatest mind, the father of Western thought, everything since him has been but a footnote. Even Socrates? Yep, wacko. Hang on a second. What if you can not only verify your dianoia in nous and use that dialectic you've developed to nous to understand and integrate that into a state of being, maybe called enlightenment or phronesis, that will never leave you. So it's not just a one-off. What about the people who've reached that level? No. Well, you're anti-logos. You're saying no to everything. Ignoring all the evidence, ignoring all the reasoning, refusing to play the game, refusing to verify, refusing to take your experience of nous and understand it as well and integrate it. You're not reading. Reading is to read what's there without projecting our interpretation or our beliefs or leaving out what is there. If you're not reading, you don't have integrity. You're not matching the mind of the author. Now, at the end of it, it might turn out that it is all rubbish, and you throw it away, and you send an angry letter to the publisher. But you got to play the game first. And we have reasons to trust Parmenides. We have reasons to trust Socrates. We have reasons to trust the Logos. And it ain't because we grew up in his house. And if you are such a person who is so convinced that you're not even willing to try or start or even plug your ears. Now, that's funny. Recently, at the Democratic National Convention, protesters have been protesting the genocide, and they've been literally walking out with their fingers in their ears, like making like la 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 noises. Literally happening at the time of the recording. And the Democratic National Convention by politicians who are supporting genocide. Now, it's easy to point fingers at them, but we need to see where, because we're all in this game together. Where are we doing that? What are we close to seeing? What are we close to doing? And if you find yourself as one of those people, what do? Make it into a question. Ideally, a question in the form of a dialectic, if this exists, if it doesn't. But why did I believe that? What would follow if I do believe it? What would follow if the other is true? Otherwise, how are you functioning? Are you helping? Are you helping those who do seek truth? So, be puzzled. You might think you're not doing it. Look harder. At what parts of my life do I feel certain and enclosed for the possibility for new logos to come in? Take that question with you. And I think on that note, let's call that a day. And let's see what happens to Meno next time. Is Meno going to go further? Is Meno going to go further? Is Meno stuck? Does he have this greatest problem Parmenides pointed to? By the way, this is why we also play this game. So as Parmenides is saying, even if you're talking to Socrates himself, you might be closed. That's why we do this, because false beliefs that weren't caused through the Logos can't be resolved through the Logos. It's the image. So, thank you for sharing your opinions. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for phrasing them as a question. Thank you for trying out the format, seeing what follows. Because hey, if it's an opinion, what's going to happen? You're either going to be ignored or people are going to try and help you, and you're going to see them as fighting, because that's all opinions do, is fight with other opinions. It doesn't unify through truth. Now, that's often what religious people point to. Hey, that feeling of being victimized and targeted because you are sharing your stupid opinions and no one agrees with you, that's what faith is. That's what makes you closer to Jesus or whatever. Don't mistake people disagreeing with you for virtue. That is not the feeling of virtue. We have a question as we read. What is the feeling of virtue? What is the state of mind that accompanies somebody in excellence? That's a question we'll take with us as we read. And if you are willing to play the game of turning opinions into questions and seeing where it happens, to have a question is to be on a quest.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Then I applaud your courage. If you don't do it, we will shed a tear and go back to what we're doing, and encourage you to join us if and when you're willing. And if you don't, we will say it's because of the color of your hair. That's our kind of racism. That's the true one. Because hey, where does your soul live? In your head, right? There is no soul. It's your brain. It's all just neurochemicals and squirting of like, you know, all that endorphins and stuff. That's what the soul is. And what's the closest to your brain? Your hair. So why can some people be philosophers and some can't? And why did Socrates get it wrong? When he said it's old and young and women and men who all gain excellence and gain the good through the same virtues. What did Socrates miss? What made him a big dummy? He didn't realize your hair is closest to your brain, and that's what the soul is. So if you're not able to do this, we'll say it's because of your hair color. There's a certain logic to that, isn't there? And if you say no, there isn't, we will ignore you or fight with you. And when we fight, we'll take that feeling of energy and we'll mistake that for courage. We'll take that feeling of righteous indignation and mistake it for justice. And get stuck living and dying with the same problems we will play out in every area of our life. Division. That will end in the same way it concluded from the other person who taught us about hair color racism. Synthesis and analysis. We will play out the dialectic stuck in our ignorance, preventing us an ousia that doesn't cycle up but stays stagnant. That's the game we'll play if you disagree with us. But if you do agree with us, trust the logos. If you're open to trusting the logos or find good reason to, then I applaud your courage for taking your opinions and phrasing them as questions and sacrificing whatever it has to be sacrificed to do that. All the many pats on your head from Papa and Mama and whatever part of society that you fit in with well because you have that belief. Hey, maybe you have tenureship at a university and you'll get kicked out if you are into this logos game of questions and dialectic and helping people and empathy and unifying humanity under understanding, elevating away from opinions and beliefs. Or maybe it's worth sacrificing ignorance. Maybe you won't even get the benefit in this life. Maybe you'll be like Socrates and they'll off you. But the payoff will come 2,500 years when people are reading the Meno on this channel. And maybe you reincarnate back and you get the benefit yourself. These are good questions. The thing about this game is we have a lot of great questions that come up. How easy would it be to dismiss the reincarnation question? Dismiss the functioning 2,500 years through time question? Super, super easy. Hey, that's not practical. That ain't gonna get you a job. That ain't gonna make you money. Stock market, that's where you need to focus on, son. Super easy. But one of the benefits from this game is we get all these questions. So, On that note, thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And hey, we're all in this journey together. We all start somewhere. As Socrates said, he didn't meet Parmenides knowing everything. Socrates said, hey, everyone starts through their physical senses. You have to love learning to even ask the question about a cause of the physical world. That was his second search of causes. And he didn't have any teachers who were in that game. He had to figure it out for himself. So we all start somewhere. And our question is, where do we go? Where does it go? How far can we push the implication? And as we said in chat, the further we push the implication, the further insights we get, the further questions we get, the further insights that result from those questions, giving birth to more questions. And the more we push the insights, the greater we can go all the way. Let's see where Socrates and Meno goes with this question about the good, excellence, being, big questions. And even if Meno doesn't get there, we don't have to be limited by the ignorance of Meno or anyone around us. Hey, if he only gets the first level of reading, and if he's even shut down to that, we can get the third and the second, like we were doing here. If self-virtue wasn't in selves, then people couldn't be good in the self way. First level of reading. If the virtue isn't one thing in all these particular virtues. Hello from Sweden. So if self-virtue, the being of virtue, wasn't in justice and temperance, then all of the different people, men, women, black and white, African or whatever, would not be good in the same way. That's the first level of reading. Second level of reading. If virtue in being was not in the selves, if all of the other beings, beauty itself, justice itself, justice, if beauty itself, if equality itself, if they weren't all in, if they also didn't have excellence, then how could we reach the one good self through being? If the second hypothesis, the brilliant light of being, is the vestibule or the gateway towards the one self or the good self, then if all the selves didn't have excellence or virtue, so we're not in the physical world anymore, we're in the realm of being, looking at all of the different ideas, aspects of being. So, the particular, because remember, 3 readings of self, just like 3 levels of question if you watch a Christopher Nolan movie. The main narrative that your grandma watches and walks away, oh yeah, I guess he got his family. Like if we talk about Inception, that's the one I like to point to. Oh, he got his family and saw his kids in the end. What a lovely movie, says grandma. But we notice the twist at the end. Oh, there's actually a second question. Whether or not Leonardo DiCaprio, the main character, is himself asleep. That's the twist. And there's a third level of reading that you only get if you go down a YouTube rabbit hole. People who really study, actually, it goes beyond that. There's an even deeper question. 3 levels of a good film, just like 3 levels of self here. Just like 3 levels of reality, becoming, being, and the one, the ultimate. So, if the being of virtue wasn't in the particular virtues, temperance and justice, that we're talking about for men and women and even African people, referring to a false belief in the chat. I mean, potentially false. Take it as a hypothesis. See where it goes. Don't just believe me. In fact, you won't believe me if it's your belief. I'm not interested in fighting beliefs. We're interested in encouraging questions. See for yourself. That's understanding. You don't believe anyone if you can understand. Right? So that's first level. Second level, what's the honorific? Being. If the being of virtue wasn't in the selves honorific, if all of the things that we use the dialectic to see in being, as Parmenides says, allow being to exist, and the greatest problem is if you don't, you'll be stuck forever, or hopefully something will wake you up. That's the greatest problem. Even Parmenides said it's the worst problem, greatest puzzle, right? So in being, all of the things we apply the dialectic to, beauty itself, equality itself, wholeness itself, difference itself, infinity itself, all of those ideas that we explore in the Parmenides particularly, and in the other dialogues. If they didn't have excellence, how could we reach the good in the same way? What could that mean? Well, if we all apply the dialectic, our goal is to, what's the goal of the dialectic? To experience it. So how can we behold the honorific of the good, the idea of the good? We talked about it's no good just turning up to these videos or the chat to share opinions and disagree with people. You have to have a certain level of virtue, excellence. You have to be willing to read. Not just read by projecting your opinions, that's interpretation, or leaving out what is there, that's interpretation. To see exactly what is there and being open to it, and open to doing the things Socrates says you need to do to read. He's not telling you that I'm doing a dialectic. Hey, by the way, I'm doing a dialectic as we saw here. So you can just go, oh, that's cool. No, he's saying you do it. Unpack it. He said in the Phaedo, I am Ionius, the assistant to Hercules. You are the main character.
You're a wizard, Harry.
That requires excellence as a prerequisite. If you're not doing it with excellence, you're not in the game. In fact, our little man of what we are here, where are we? This guy. What does it mean to be a philosopher? Have questions, develop hypotheses, look for key terms, look for patterns, push the implications. We talked about that today. But also, you have to be above all else seeking excellence. Otherwise, you give up when you hit your blocks. Or you give up when you freed enough blocks to become a banker or to become a womanizer. Or what we said, intemperance, mastering some desires to get other desires. That's vice. Seeking excellence is to be a philosopher.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Don't settle and use your freedom or insight to pursue physical desires. That would be being sneaky.
Sneaky little hobbitses. Sneaky little hobbitses.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
Don't eat a monkey like Joe Rogan.
I don't want to eat a monkey.
I don't want to eat a
I
monkey.
don't want to eat a monkey.
That would be pursuing hedonistic pleasures.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. Don't eat a monkey. So, what does that mean? If we are seeking the selves in our dialectic with excellence, we should all reach the beholding of the idea of the good in the same way. For there to be a paradigm, a method, the dialectic, the logos, any idea of being should lead to you beholding the good if you pursue it with temperance, justice, courage, excellence, the virtues. So that's the next level of reading. But there's a third level of reading. If our goal is not the good, the idea of the good, but the good itself, then self-virtue has to be in the selves. As Parmenides says, you have to permit the ideas of being to be in the self. That's the third level. When you reach the selves, the excellence you're experiencing has to be something to do with the one self, allowing you to use it as a gateway or vestibule to reach the good. That's what we've been talking about today. Using the experience and the understanding of the second hypothesis, the brilliant light of being, the highest level of enlightenment in some traditions. Use the experience and the understanding of it to use your nurture, your practice of having questions to go beyond it to reach the good. Now, I don't know if any of those are correct. That's playing the game. That's being curious. Maybe you have a different way of reading this section that applies self, the good, the self. Self is used 3 times, the good is used once. How would you read it in 3 ways? Play with that question. Let me know how you go. Share your reflections in the comment section on YouTube. Share it with us in the Discord if you want to join the Discord. Let me know how you go. And hey, if you reach a block, keep those objections in mind as you go. Say, hey, okay, I'll listen to you. You say I'm not good enough. You say there's no such thing as being. I'm going to write that in another section, a dialectic on what happens if you're true, voice in my head telling me that to stop doing this. And then I'm going to go back because I'm still supposed to read without interpretation anyway. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what my opinions are. That's not reading. Who cares about your dumb opinions? Even my dumb opinions. No one cares. Not even me. That's not reading. That's not excellence. But I'm not ignoring it. There are some spiritual traditions that build up a lot of jiriki or chi, like Dragon Ball Z, ki, psychic energy to push past those objections, but that's not our game. That's gold because we also have a channel for this. We use that in our exploration of the dialectic because we're supposed to master not just this dialectic, but what if it doesn't exist? We have to master side B of the dialectic, which is what we do with our problems. So, as Parmenides says, let's bring up that quote. Keep in mind, okay, permit the ideas of real beings to be. Read with excellence. Keep your mind fixed on the recent objections that would come up for Socrates and others like them. Keep in mind your objections. Define each of the ideas, that's dianoia, but also allow each of them to be of the self. That allows for that 3 level of reading that we have. So, what do you come up with? Create your own. And by the way, you know what's cool? If you do come up with a level of reading, this sentence that we have here in 3 ways as a question, and you share it, you get to connect. We can share our questions. We can help each other. Very different game than having an opinion. You either already agree or you don't. No one goes anywhere. You can start a genocide though. But we're not doing that. We are creating questions, sharing them. Please do. Please follow along. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Join on Twitch if you want. If you join on Discord, you get notifications when we go live. If you want to support on Patreon, please do. Greatly appreciated. And see you next time. Full of puzzlement, I hope, and a whole sackload of questions.